Before this video, we recommend watching the Converus Products Overview presentation, which provides introductory information about EyeDetect. We will also mention terms discussed and defined in the Basics of Eye Detection Test presentation. We recommend watching that video as well. A test protocol is a specific testing format. In lab studies, scientists test many concepts to attain the highest possible rates of testing accuracy. Then the science team design specific protocols and algorithms with unique rules based on their findings. After several lab studies for EyeDetect, 5 testing protocols were developed. Those are the MCT, AMCT, RCT, DLC3, and DLC2. These are based on the findings of previous lab studies, for which many peer-reviewed articles have been published. Let us begin with the MCT protocol, which stands for Multi-Issue Comparison Topic. MCT tests can have between 2 and 3 relevant topics or target issues in a single test. For its comparison or baseline question, it would have at least one comparison topic. This topic must meet the requirements for comparison topics. The MCT has neutral questions that are presented to give the examinee a mental break from relevant questions. These are math questions which are single-digit addition equations. Each topic will have 6 true and 6 false statements. Each statement should be unique but address the same topic. So there are 12 different statements per topic. 6 that require a true response and 6 that require a false response. The average test length is about 30 minutes. A digital voice is not required for the MCT protocol. If one is available, it will read aloud the pretest instructions while the examinee can read along. All test questions are presented visually by the computer, requiring the examinee to read them. The examinee responds to statements by clicking the left or green button on the mouse for true or the right or red button for false. They can also choose the left arrow on the keyboard for true and the right arrow for false. The average accuracy of MCT is up to 88%, depending on whether the test has adhered to best practices, which are discussed in our Basics of Lie Detection presentation. Next is the AMCT protocol, which stands for Audio-Only Multi-Issue Comparison Topic. It is an MCT test for poor readers. As such, there are only a few differences from the MCT. First, the number of true and false statements is 4 each, making the total per topic 8 instead of 12. Second, a digital voice is required to read the entire test aloud to the examinee. No reading is required because no text appears on the screen during the test. Therefore, questions are presented orally by the digital voice. They will see a simple image to give their eyes a place to focus on which they listen and wait to respond. Once they can respond, an image of a mouse will appear. If they look away from the screen at any moment for too long, a 3-second countdown of screen appears and the voice will tell them to look back at the screen before the test can continue. Because of this, there are no telemetry screens after 15-second breaks. The eye tracker is constantly monitoring their eye position and will halt if it is not in an ideal position. And the last difference between the two is the accuracy for AMCT, which is 86%. Next is the DLC3 protocol. DLC stands for Directed Lie Comparison. This is an updated version of the original DLC protocol, using both field and lab study data to improve the reliability of its algorithm. DLC3 can have only one relevant topic or target issue. The comparison or baseline question is a directed lie, or one to which the examinee is required to lie. This required to lie concept is discussed more in any of our DLC protocol pretest checklist presentations or the DLC test writer courses. Neutral questions are a single-digit math equations will be present. The relevant topic and directed lie will have 5 true and 5 false statements. Each statement should still be unique, so there are 10 different statements for the relevant topic and 10 for the directed lie. 5 that require a true response and 5 that require a false response. The total approximate time for a DLC3 test is about 15 minutes. A digital voice is not required, but it is preferred for accuracy. The lab study was conducted with the use of a digital voice, so to run a test without one is not recommended. If there is one, it will read the entire test aloud. The questions are therefore presented orally and visually by the computer. Without a digital voice, reading would be required. With one, it would still be preferred since that was how the lab study was conducted. Like MCT, the examiner responds to test questions by clicking the mouse or the keyboard, left green buttons for true, and right red buttons for false. And the accuracy of the DLC3 protocol is around 84%. Then we have the DLC2 protocol. It is the previous version of the directed light protocol to the DLC3 and is less common now that we have updated it. It has a few differences from the DLC3 which might make it preferred or not preferred. These differences are, first, there are not true-false statements. Instead, the DLC2 protocol uses yes-no questions, which some examinees find easier to comprehend when responding to the directed lie. There are 3 no for the relevant topic and then 1 yes and 2 no for the directed lie. That makes a total of 3 unique questions needed for both the relevant topic and the directed lie. Second, the DLC2's average test length is about 20 minutes. Even though it has fewer questions than the DLC3, it is still longer because there are 22-second pauses in between each question. This is because the DLC2 was derived from the EyeDetect Plus lab study, which is our automated polygraph product. In this study, the examinee is given time to return their vitals to a baseline before continuing with the test. This is not technically needed for DLC2 because it does not use polygraph data, and ocular has a quicker recovery time. However, it still follows the same structure since it was derived from it. Third, a digital voice is required. Without one, the test will not function. Like DLC3, the questions are presented both orally and visually, and reading is still preferred, even though a digital voice will be present to read the test questions aloud. The final difference from DLC3 is the accuracy, which for DLC2 is around 87. Some might argue that this means it is better than the DLC3 protocol. However, a 3% difference is not significant, and the DLC3 algorithm was derived from both lab and field study, while DLC2 was just from lab study. We find that field study data to be more reliable. This table summarizes these main differences between DLC3 and DLC2. The DLC3 has true-false statements, while the DLC2 has yes-no. If you have an examinee that struggles with the directed lie concept, it might be better to administer a DLC2 since the yes-no expected response is easier to comprehend. The DLC3 has more unique statements compared to the DLC2's unique statements. As such, this decreases the likelihood that our test result will be random response. A random response result is discussed more in the administrator training, but is basically when a certain percentage of responses are unexpected or confessing to guilt, instead of affirming innocence. With only 3 questions in DLC2, the chance of reaching this percentage is increased because there are so few total questions. In DLC3, it is less likely because there are more total questions. DLC3 tests are shorter because there's no 22-second pause in between every test question. For DLC3, a digital voice is just preferred for accuracy, while DLC2 is required or their test will not function. With the digital voice, both DLC3 and DLC2 still prefer the examinee to be able to read the test questions in order to ensure accuracy. The algorithm for the DLC3 is more reliable since it was derived from both lab and field study data, while the DLC2 was just from lab study. DLC3's mean accuracy is 84%, while DLC2's is 87%. In summary, unless you have an examinee struggling with the directed lie concept, we would recommend the DLC3 protocol over the DLC2 for most EyeDetect testing needs. I'd finally like to mention the RCT protocol. It stands for Relevant Comparison Topic. It is the very first EyeDetect protocol and has since been updated to the MCT. As such, it shares a few similarities with the MCT. First, its total number of relevant topics is 1. For its comparison question, it uses 1 relevant comparison topic. It has both math and common knowledge neutral questions. Common knowledge ones are ones we would expect everyone to know the answer to, like the sky is blue. Each topic will have 8 unique true and 8 unique false statements, so there are 16 different statements per topic, 8 that require a true response and 8 that require a false response. Average test length is around 30 minutes like the MCT. And also like the MCT, a digital voice is not required, and if there is one, it will only read aloud the pre-test instructions. The test questions are presented visually, and so reading is required. The examinee responds the same way as MCT with clicking the mouse or the keyboard. And test accuracy is around 86%. We might recommend you use the RCT protocol if you need a single issue only and the directed lie is too hard for your examinee. Each EyeDetect protocol will have its own unique format, but in general they will all follow the same structure. Every test starts with pre-test instructions or a preamble. In the preamble, topics are introduced and defined. Instructions on how the examinee should behave and respond to test questions are given. After the preamble, there is a practice test. It is used to get the examinee accustomed to reading and/or listening to questions and responding by clicking the mouse or keyboard. The practice test for MCT, AMCT, and RCT test has random true-false questions about fake crimes or common knowledge topics. The examinee should answer these truthfully. For the directed lie protocols, it will be some practice directed lie questions. The examinee should answer these as directed, which is to lie to them. Next is the actual test. It will be a series of sessions containing relevant comparison, directed lie, or neutral questions depending on the protocol. Each session is followed by 15-second breaks in which the examinee can relax before the test proceeds. This, of course, excludes the AMCT protocol. To learn more about these sessions and how they differ per protocol, please review the administering test presentation for each protocol. That concludes this presentation on EyeDetect test protocols. Thank you.